Hey, Chris, do you know what day it is tomorrow?
Wait. It's the Mondo Megabits mint date.
Hey, Joey.
Joey.
No. Do you know what day it is tomorrow?
Oh, fuck. It's the Mondo Megabits mint.
Hey, Jet, do you know what is the day tomorrow?
The Mondo Megabits midday is tomorrow, 12 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, 12:30 p.m. Public mint the NFTs. Ah!
It's filming.
Hey, Julie, do you know what day it is tomorrow?
It's Mondo Megabits mint day.
Hey, Miles, do you know what day it is tomorrow?
It's the Mondo Megabits mint date tomorrow.
Hey, Julian, do you know what day it is tomorrow?
Tomorrow? It's that Mondo Megabits mint day, kid!
Hey, I'm here with Jet and Neptune. We are burning the midnight oil right now, getting ready for the moment. This is 2 years of work. We're about to see if it goes well or not. What are you gonna do if it doesn't go well?
Well,
I'm gonna kill myself. What are
my
you gonna do?
anticipated Honda Civic purchase will be downgraded to a bicycle. That'll be better for me in the long run. So.
Well, I'll still be able to buy a gun if we don't mint out. Don't worry, guys, I'm good. Okay, so this video is the rule set for the game right now. The game is not playable because you need to have cards from probably at least three factions, because the first faction doesn't have that many creatures in it. And these are the draft, unplay-tested rules for the game. We're going to be honing this along with the Discord community. We're going to be figuring out what works, what doesn't work. However, here's our proposal, our draft proposal for game rules. It's supposed to be, the idea with this is that it's playable if you get really autistic and argumentative about it. And on top of that, the rule set is supposed to be a little bit funny, not so funny that it's nonsensical, but funny enough that it's kind of like Dungeons and Dragons, where if your rationale for why you're right is good enough, then you win, that kind of thing. But at the end of the day, it's still it's still a competitive card game, but there is an element of storytelling involved with how schizophrenic your statements are for why you win. And one of the things that we want to do is we want to have a $1 million tournament that's based on just whoever's like the biggest retard, like the most argumentative, the hardest to get along with, like the biggest asshole there, genuinely, will be the winner.
Yeah.
Anyway, this is what we've been working on for 2 years. It's about to launch tomorrow. Here's the draft rule set explainer video.
The keys to the kingdom. The ultimate aim of a game of Mondo Megabits is to control the narrative. The narrative is not merely a story told by the powers that be to justify their actions. It is not merely a set of guidelines for world governments to try their best to adhere to. It is not merely some commonly shared myth that makes all of the schlubs and shitheads feel like they might one day get a piece of the action themselves if they just make it through another week of stocking shelves and smoking fentanyl. The narrative is reality. Form your narrative and start the conversation. To form your narrative, simply combine an agenda, any subtype, a figurehead, and an incantation. You now have a narrative. It was that easy. These cards sit closest to the player and remain on the board throughout play. Their effects can be triggered at any time, including to interrupt enemy play. After triggered, they are tapped but not discarded. Unlike the regular cards in the player's hand, they do not untap at the beginning of the next turn. Instead, they must be funded to untap. More on this later. The three cards, your narrative, collectively start with a single counter at 0. This 0 represents their current state of acceptance among the masses. The scale goes from -5 to 5, with 0 being in the middle. -5. Your narrative is a conspiracy theory. You lose. -4. Rogan. -3. Highly unlikely but still believed by antisocial types. -2. Sounds fishy. Think Princess Diana. -1. Now at 0, that's the baseline, your hypothetically possible proposal TED Talk level. Getting into the positive. 1. Gaining traction with quote-unquote academics. 2. Science-backed. 3. Taught to kindergartners. 4. Your narrative must be believed to hold a job or rent an apartment/car. 5. Your narrative is a fundamental underlying truth which cannot be escaped or questioned. You win. The game is over when one player's narrative has either lost completely or won. It's a -5 or a 5. Discredit, disown, disenfranchise. To attack your opponent's narrative, you must first wipe out all the creatures in their hand. Then you must have already triggered their buffer zone. More on this later. You cannot discredit your opponent's narrative on the same turn that their buffer zone has been triggered. After this has been done, you must still have at least one untapped creature in your hand to do the attacking. Regardless of this creature's attack abilities, special equipment, etc., your attack may only damage your opponent's narrative by 1 point in a given turn. Even if you have 5 creatures ready to attack, it is still 1 point per turn. The one exception to all of the above is cards of the type Plot Twist. Most plot twists don't do narrative damage, but those that do may be used at any point on their own or in conjunction with a regular attack, etc., whenever. Emancipate, embolden, empower. To empower your own narrative by 1 point, you must spend 10 funding points at once. Certain plot twists and other cards may empower your narrative as well. These may be used at any time. Intersectionality, aka mixing factions. As a puppet master, you are not locked in specifically to the use of one faction's cards. Many cards have intra-faction synergies. They will say so. However, you are an ideological chameleon and an unabashed pragmatist. As a matter of fact, for most factions, it is impossible to play using only cards from that faction. Diversity is actually a prerequisite, though labor representation/fair wages are not. For you, it is simple child's play to take an agenda from the techno-oppressive FEMA cube and set to work upon it lackeys from Bum Army 2099, psychos, and ditch diggers. It's as easy as 1, 2, 3 to take rainbow rioters, team pink bean lesbians, and navel-gazing intelligentsia and get them working together to support a jackbooted, cop-sucking figurehead from the Thin Blue Wine. Manipulating creatures to act not only in your will but against their own is such an easy feat that it is taken for granted as a core game mechanic and costs nothing, not even a moment of attention. Behind the scenes, of course, there's a great deal of engineering multiple layers of blackmail and ultrasonic 5G programming to get the neo-Nazis to play nice with the black Hebrew Israelites. Thankfully, this is done on behalf of the player by the game designers. Just another way Mondo Megabits rewards you. Funding. Nothing is free, not even for the frugal survival rats of Bum Army 2099. Bringing any card into your hand requires funding, equal to 2 points plus half that card's rarity level, rounded down. R1 cards cost 2 points, R2 and R3 cards cost 3 points, R4 and R5 cost 4 points, and R6 cards cost 5 points of funding. Both players start with the maximum amount of 20 funding thanks to a generous grant from George Soros and the Sackler family. Funding is restored every turn at a rate of 4 funding per turn. Certain tactics may increase a player's funding, but never above the maximum. Maximum funding implies the player is able to print fake money at a rate which supersedes all the world's wealth, and thus it is impossible to exceed maximum funding without breaking the laws of physics. The deck, the hand, the discard pile. The deck, the hand, and discard pile all function as one would expect from a card game. At the beginning of every turn, the player may look at the top 3 cards in his deck. He may play whichever of these cards he can afford to, discard whichever he likes, or place them all back on top of the deck if he wishes. Cards are played with funding. After a card has been exhausted, more on this later, it is sent to the discard pile. Once all cards in the deck have been played or discarded, the player takes the discard pile, shuffles it, and it becomes his deck again. The board. The board refers to the actual surface where cards are played, whether it be a table, a cardboard box, or a dirty, needle-covered floor. The board is divided into 3 zones. 1. The think tank. This is where your narrative goes, closest to the puppet master. That's you. 2. The buffer zone. The player may place face down up to 1 tactic, 1 creature card of patsy, double agent, or bad actor subtypes only, and 1 challenge card in between his think tank and the opponent as a stopgap emergency measure. These cards are not played in normal play. Instead, they are triggered 1 time only and all at once should your opponent breach your front lines and threaten to attack your narrative. Regardless of what is written on these cards, they are discarded after being triggered, after which point the buffer zone remains empty for the remainder of gameplay. And 3. The battle zone. This is where all the player's active cards go. Factions. Factions more or less represent the ideological stripe and aesthetic presentation of all cards which fall under their domain. Certain cards of the same faction, when played together, will have synergistic benefits. It will say so on the cards, especially when paired with the faction's faction card. That's the one describing the faction. However, in Mondo, just as in real life, most allegiances and distinctions will dissolve into muck with the right mix of well-timed lies and injections of non-profit liquid capital. Synergies can be powerful, but players should not feel restricted from mixing cards from seemingly disparate factions. It is the Puppet Master's job to ensure that all parties ultimately serve power. Card types and subtypes. Creatures. All regimes ultimately need armies to enforce their insane whims. Your creatures are that army. Creatures may not act during the same turn that they are played. This is known as summoning sickness, a term that we invented. A creature may either do a basic attack or an ability, but not both, every turn. Creatures with 5 or higher fighting ability may perform 2 attacks per turn. Creatures with 10 fighting ability may perform 3 attacks. Creatures with 5 or higher energy projection may perform 2 abilities per turn. Creatures with 10 NRG may perform 3 abilities per turn. Creatures with 5 or higher swag may perform both basic attacks and abilities in the same turn, and may perform as many as their respective FYT and NRG ratings will allow. A basic attack does damage to a single target in the amount of 100 times the attacking creature's STR, or strength rating. Abilities do different things on a case-by-case basis. They are written at the bottom of the card. Creatures remain in play until they are destroyed. Items. Items cost 2 funding points to play regardless of rarity. Items do various things and have various effects, usually buffing one or another stat or giving its owner some new ability. They must be attached to a creature in order to function. When the holding creature is destroyed, the item may be passed on to another creature. If all creatures are destroyed, return all in-play items to your discard pile. The number of items that a creature may hold is, like in real life, based on its swag, or SWG stat. 1 to 3 swag, 1 item limit. 3 to 6 swag, 2 items. 6 to 9 swag, 3 items. And if your creature's got 10 swag, he can have as many items as he wants. Tactics. Tactics cost 2 funding points to play regardless of rarity. Tactics are one-time use cards that do something. Start a fire, steal a wallet, make people come, etc. Tactics most usually will have multiple effects listed at the bottom of the card. All these effects must be enacted simultaneously. The player cannot choose to skip effects that do not benefit him. Sometimes these effects will be a case of either or, where one gets enacted and the other ignored. If this is the case, it will say so on the card explicitly. Tactics enter into play when they are funded, but don't take effect until their owner declares them to be so. This may be done at any time. They are discarded immediately thereafter. Agendas. Agendas are powerful, and it is recommended that they be dealt with expediently. An opponent agenda can be dismantled by any single attack. However, an agenda cannot be attacked while your opponent still has creatures in play, unless you attack the agenda with a card that explicitly states you may do so while enemy creatures are alive. You attack the agenda with a creature whose intelligence is 8 or higher. You attack the agenda with a creature of one of the following subtypes: figurehead, revolutionary, bad actor, double agent. Dismantling an opponent's agenda card will discredit their narrative by 1 point. If you have already funded and played an agenda card but wish to swap it out with another, you may do so 1 time. Plot twists. Plot twists change the game and radically shift the paradigm. They can be enacted at any point in play. Their effects are wide-reaching and powerful, and each card does something different. After a player plays a plot twist, all effects from tactics and agendas are halted for 1 full turn. This applies to both players. These are discarded after use. Locations. Locations are persistent cards which dictate the environment of play and have effects which usually apply to both players. They may be played without providing funding. Only 1 location may be played at a time, and the card is set to the side and turned so that both players may see it. The location is removed and returned to its owner's discard pile only when either player plays a new location card. For example, a player might play a location which is a planet with very high gravity, making it impossible for creatures with strength lower than 5 to perform basic attacks. This debuff would apply to both players. If the opponent had no creature cards with strength higher than 5, he would not be able to do any basic attacks until playing some new creatures or playing a new location. Challenges. Challenges are sets of conditions which, when met, provide some sort of buff or bonus to the persons meeting them. They may be played without providing any funding. This is known as a free contest. Like locations, challenges are placed to the side and turned so that both players may see. Once a challenge has been completed by a player, the other player has 1 turn to try to complete it themselves before it is removed from play and placed back in its owner's discard pile. Buffs and debuffs. Buffs and debuffs may be played for 1 funding point. They are similar to items in that they must be applied to a creature, and their effects persist until that creature is destroyed. They may be applied to a creature of your own, or to an opponent's creature. Once applied, they can't be removed. You just gotta live with them. Like AIDS. Like HIV. Much like monkeypox. The proper way to think of this is the same way you think about monkeypox. Jet, I think you should use all those in the edit. Okay. Groups. Group cards cost 3 funding points to play and provide persistent benefits to all friendly creatures until they're removed. To remove an opponent's group card only requires 1 attack of any type. However, a group card cannot be attacked while any creatures of the same faction are in play. Group cards sometimes have abilities. If there are multiple abilities listed, only 1 may be used per turn. Once a group's ability has been used, it cannot be used a second time. Skills. Skills cost 1 funding point to play. They're similar to items, but they are destroyed when the creature they are attached to is destroyed. Incantations. Incantations invoke the dark side of Mondo Megabits. You might want to think twice before adding these to your deck. They're like tactics, but they cost 0 funding points to play, and they must be played immediately upon seeing them in the deck. The player may not choose to not play them. Information. Information is free and typically useless, but worth its weight in gold to someone like me. These cards sometimes have abilities and effects, but are mostly just there to provide a little spice and backstory to an otherwise boring and dry game. When a card effect conflicts with the core rules of the game, remember that cards always hold priority over the rules. How to play. In order to play Mondo Megabits, you will need the following. A deck of about 40 or so cards. There is no upper limit to the number of cards one's deck may contain. However, you may not have more than 3 copies of a single card in your deck. Some dice, or another way of generating random numbers. Tokens to keep track of damage, funding, etc. Substances to casually abuse. A lack of conscience, shame, or any other quality that would imply retention of a human nature, especially the desire to blame this game's creators for any trouble players may cause or get themselves into. Please watch the training video. At the beginning of the game, each player may look at the first 12 cards in his deck and play whatever he wishes and has funding for. Any unplayed cards from this look are sent to the discard pile. Play order is determined by a bare-knuckle fistfight. Whoever wins the fistfight may play their cards first. After the first 2 turns, normal gameplay commences. 4 funding is added to each player's funding at the beginning of each turn, and the active player may look at the next 3 cards in his deck and do what he wishes accordingly. Then he may play whichever cards are active according to the rules. When he has run out of possible actions, or wishes to end his turn, he does so and passes active play status to the opponent. Not in my mind. Not in my mind. The ultimate arbiter of Mondo rules is pure schizophrenic force of will, complaining, gang stalking, dementia, gaslighting, love bombing. Any rule can be bent, even broken, if you make a big enough scene or cause enough problems for enough people. The degree to which you express your autism in, say, a high-stakes Mondo Megabits tournament will ultimately decide the degree to which you are victorious. We here at Mondo Megabits wish you the best of luck, the most of fun, the greatest of thrills, and the least of worries. May your play be good. Goodbye.